Hi, welcome to the channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. I recently watched a video of Johan Mearsheimer, who was a guest at a sort of a live show from Alexander Mercouris and Glen Diesen. And I must say I was a little bit disappointed. I've never listened to Johan Mearsheimer or read any of his articles, but he has been mentioned many times on the pro-Russian side. He is a little bit more skeptic about the Western narrative, and he has written some articles that was counter to what the common narrative was in the West, the so-called propaganda. But yes. Firstly, they asked him a question about, I can't remember what the question was, but basically it was that he stated the reason why the Americans are acting as they're acting is because they have always believed they are the good guys. And everybody's the bad guys. And that is what they used in order to motivate all their military adventures. Well, I don't know what to say about that. Do you believe you are a bad guy, or do you believe you are a good guy? Doesn't everybody believe they are the good guys and the opposition forces are always the bad guys? It's always a black and white type of definition and view. But nobody considers that there might be two good guys, or you might be wrong and then you might be the bad guy. Now, if you kill innocent people, then you are a bad guy. And if you look at the Libyan conflict, the bombing, then you were the bad guy. That means NATO and America were the bad guys. They destroyed a functioning government for their own purpose. The same with Saddam Hussein and Iraq. And Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11. That we all knew from the start. The Taliban had nothing to do with it. Yes, maybe Al-Qaeda, but that was only a pretense. They wanted to get rid of the Taliban, of the Afghan government. Well, there was a conspiracy theory about a gas and oil pipeline going through Afghanistan, which apparently there were some negotiations and Taliban didn't want to budge. And then the American negotiators said, well, then we will bomb you to the Stone Age. Well, that was I don't know if there's much truth in that, but that doesn't really matter. Taliban itself, Afghanistan had nothing to do as a country with 9/11. And I don't know why the people have to suffer. And if you kill those innocent people, which the Americans kill lots of people, in Iraq and in Afghanistan and in Libya and in Syria, then you are the bad guy. But at the end of the day, the Americans believe their own propaganda, their own hubris, and they made so much propaganda in themselves that they started to believe their propaganda. And that is the core reasons. That is the pretentious reasons. There's usually something huge, much more behind the matter that you have to go and look for. And that is basically self-interest. Money and self-interest. I mean, the core, if you ever listen to any American politicians opening their mouth, they will always state it is an American interest. We will do this because it's an American interest to do it. We will go as far as it serves our interests, our national security. As soon as it doesn't serve that purpose, they will abandon their friends, which they have done many times. And that is the core principle. But in any case, so that was John's view about the whole matter. And he's supposed to be a professor in political science, I think, at Stanford or some other university. Now, they mentioned some historic events, names, dates, and so on. I can't compete with that. He should be no knowledge about that. But then they asked him, but how does he see the future of Ukraine? The Russian-Ukrainian offensive. And basically what he stated was, it was like, there has to be a peace agreement between Russia and and Ukraine and all the stuff as if it's all about Ukraine. No. No, 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 no. Putin has stayed, Putin, Peskov, all of these guys have always stated that they are fighting NATO, that it is beyond Ukraine, that NATO is fighting Russia on Ukrainian soil, that basically is an existential threat to Russia, about their security concerns. And what John should actually have mentioned was the security proposal submitted on the 17th December 2021 by the Russians to the Americans and to NATO. And that is the basis for all future negotiations. It's not about the Donbass. It's not about Zaporizhzhia. It's not about those territories. It's about the security concerns of Russia, which they have submitted. And I will just read you some of that. It was a legal binding guarantee that NATO would not admit any new members, especially Ukraine and Georgia. And it will not deploy any additional troops or weapons in the existing member states. It seeks the revision of the 1997 NATO-Russia Founding Act, which regulates the military activities and cooperation between NATO and Russia, and a withdrawal of NATO's infrastructure and capabilities from the territories of the former Soviet Union. And we are talking about the ACES system that's currently in Romania and in Poland, which can be fitted or easily and quickly converted to a nuclear strike capability. A recognition of Russia's special interest and role in ensuring security and stability in the post-Soviet space, and a moratorium on the deployment of intermediate-range and short-range missiles in Europe, and a dialogue on strategic stability and arms control. A reform of the OSCE to make it more representative, inclusive, and effective in addressing the security challenges and conflict in Europe. Those will be the minimum starting points for any negotiations. It's not about Ukraine. Forget about that. It's just a tool. It's just the chessboard on which the matter is being played. So the fact that it wasn't even mentioned by all three, which are supposed to be highly knowledgeable in this respect, was, to be honest, seriously disappointing. Now let's look a little bit about what is Russia's really options available. Now, in my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, and I'm a little bit more aggressive in that respect than Putin would be, is like the Russians will move forward. They will either wait until the Ukrainian army has been destroyed or weakened to such an extent that they are forced to retreat till the west side of the Dnieper River. The Russians had to advance to the Dnieper River, and they have to conquer the south, Odessa, and Manipolo. I think that's the other side, Manipolo. In any case, there's another region there which starts with M, Manipolo. I think that's what it's called. They have to basically cut off Ukraine. What the effect must be is they have to reduce Ukraine to a rump state. Small state that can do nothing. Move with the advancement or the now promised ATACMS and F-16 fighters and so on. They have shown now, the Ukrainians, that they can manufacture and employ long-distance missiles, UAVs, to bomb into Russian territory. They have to force these Ukrainian forces backwards as far as possible. And that has been stated many times by Sogoi and Medvedev. The longer it goes on, the longer range the missiles they get, the more they have to push them back in order to get them out of the reach of their own territory. So, in my opinion, that is the only option. And once that has happened, then there is no purpose for the West to support Ukraine anymore. And, well, hopefully then there will be some negotiations and agreement. But I don't think that Putin wants to do that way. There's a little bit of other developments, and when you look at it, the West has always fought a battle, any conflict on multiple fronts. It was always a military exercise, a financial exercise, an economic exercise, a war, and so forth and so forth. And Russia actually approached this whole matter only from one dimension, the military aspect. They did protect themselves against the expected sanctions, which did help and prevented the collapse of the Russian economy, and that is all fine. But the conflict with the West was basically on the principle of military conflict, putting the military against the NATO-trained Ukrainian forces. But I'm starting to see a different dimensions to the whole conflict. We all know that during the COVID period, the West has printed an enormous amount of money. As far as I remember, America has printed something like $7 trillion. I'm not sure how much the European Union has printed in order to support the economies and people. But they printed a lot of money. And being one of the reserves, or both of being the reserve currencies, the euro is also one, they weakened their currency. And that is actually the main reason why there is such a high inflation. The inflation started long before the Ukrainian-Russian war even started. The war only accelerated the whole thing not because of the war, but because of the sanctions that were in place on Russia, which hurt the vulnerable economies of Europe and America to such an extent that inflation was actually accelerated. They have now increased their interest rate in order to combat this inflation. How effective that's going to be, I'm not sure. They claim that it is reducing inflation. I don't fully agree with that, because there are some fundamental structural problems in their economies. In the American sphere, they have a lack of manufacturing. They cannot really manufacture much anymore. They are more a service-oriented economy, and even that is not fully accepted and being mistrusted throughout the world. They're still dependent on China's production or the Asian production, cheap production. Europe still was dependent on the cheap energy from Russia, which is now gone. And they also didn't develop their technology, especially Germany. They stuck to the old traditional type of technology. They didn't spend a lot of money in research and development. So they're behind the rest of the curve, and so is Italy. And I don't know much about France's economy, but so is the British. British also mostly a service-oriented financial system. Now the whole system is financial, but the financial system is in jeopardy because of all the zero interest loans that were made, quantitative easing, and that money wasn't spent as it was supposed to spend in order to develop the economy and increase production and build factories and so on. No, it was for speculation on the stock exchange and to buy back your own shares in order to cover your own decrease in sales and turnover. So most of the companies in America are well into debt because they took on the loans at zero interest in order to buy back their shares. The financial system, that's why we had those bank collapses. The bond market has been crashing. So from a financial point of view, the Western world is very unstable, contrary to what is the general perception. But if you listen to the guys that actually speak what they see, like Gerald Celente and I can't now remember all the Michael Hutchinson, sorry, I can't remember. I don't remember that much. They're good, that names and so on. But they will come to me. In any case, so now, what has happened, what has Putin decided to do? Well, he has brought a second dimension, in my opinion. And he has taken the coup cue, is that the right word, from the West, and he started a financial war. And the financial war is in the form of energy. Now, I've stated many times in my previous videos, oil and gas is a closed circle. There's just enough production in order to satisfy the needs of the world's energy requirements. That is why we have OPEC, and that is why OPEC controls the output. As long as they cut back on production for a simple reason to make it to make it more scarce product, oil, and therefore the prices stay high. Now, just for instance sake, Saudi Arabia needs the price of oil to be about $80 because it forms a huge part of their budget. And if it goes below it, they will have a deficit on their budget, so then they have to borrow money, and that's not what they want to do. So they have a self-interest to keep it about $80. And now what the Russians have done is they have convinced the Saudi Arabia to basically join them, since MBS in any case not that friendly to the West and doesn't listen to Biden. And they are now basically controlling the oil market. And they're keeping the oil market artificially high. Now, yes, there is a slowdown in the world economy. But one has to ask, what is the first? Is it the chicken or the egg? Which one was the first? There's high inflation, and because high inflation, they have higher interest. And when they have higher interest, then they have a construction of the economy. That's unfortunately how it goes. And if there's a construction of the economies of Europe and America, then there will be less need for fuel and oil, and therefore it might warrant the cutbacks in the OPEC plus oil production, Russia and Saudi Arabia. Forget about the other countries. Saudi Arabia controls basically the UAE and all the other suppliers there. Iran is more than happy to comply. Venezuela is more than happy to comply. Brasilia is even doing that. So they don't have much problems in controlling the oil market. But the higher the oil price is being kept by Putin, the more strain it is being put onto the economies of the Western nations. One must remember that oil and energy is the lifeblood of all economies. It drives economies, and if it's too expensive, you become uncompetitive, you cannot sell your products, and you don't have markets, you don't have turnover, and your companies go bankrupt. And that's precisely what's happening in Germany and in Italy, by the way. Both of their manufacturing orders have decreased, I think 40% or something like that, enormous amount. They don't have orders to produce. A lot of the companies in Germany are actually cutting back on personnel, employees, cutting back on business, and even thinking of either relocating or shutting their doors. And like we always talked about Germany, but Italy is second in line. And Italy is a much more indebted country than Germany and has much more structural problems. So all these things have a huge influence on the EU itself. But on the other hand, the EU needs money in order to support Ukraine. Now, if its economies go bad, then they will be hesitant to support Ukraine. And that is, I believe, how Putin now is playing the game. Well, part of the game. The other part is he's basically expanded to the east and China and so on, and builds his relationship with Africa and South America and other Asian countries and getting new markets. The weakest point in the east is actually China, because China is still dependent on the American market for most of its exports, but China only needs time. The more time it has, the more time it has to develop markets in Africa and South America and the other Asian countries. So unfortunately, China is one step behind Russia in that respect. And it's much more vulnerable. So if I have to think about this, Putin together, because they have a relationship with China, they have probably an agreement to extend this conflict for another couple of years, just in order for China to diversify its market and get the global south going and make the global south less dependent on the West, and thereby allow the collapse of the Western economies and basically take away their power. I don't think that Putin is actually much concerned about how long this conflict is going to take. Because, like I said, he has built up defensive lines which cannot be breached or very difficult to breach. And that in itself, the support that the Western nations are giving to Ukraine is getting less and less and less for two reasons. It's not a shortage of money. Forget about this whole shutdown in the Congress and interruption. No. The West will continue giving money to Ukraine. That's not a problem. But they will apply more for stricter rules and oversight so it isn't lost in the corrupt Ukraine itself. What amazes me actually is the fact that the West has not mobilized its military-industrial complex. Yes, there is some talk here about increasing production of 155 here, but none of the other stuff. And so, the military support that the West can give Ukraine is slowly but slowly getting less and less and less. And it's not that they don't want to, it's just that they made a number of decision mistakes. It's 18 months down the line and still they haven't developed those days. They haven't given their contracts, so I haven't made a long-term commitment on Ukraine and so on. But it is existential. That's the whole problem. Should they fail Ukraine, then Taiwan and Japan will know they cannot depend on the Americans anymore. And that relationship will also deteriorate. And so does so-called other European partners as well. And then there will be a sort of a breakdown in NATO itself. The first things are already in any case visible between Poland and Ukraine. These guys are angry at each other because Ukraine has ever behaved like an arsehole. They always demanded and never asked please. And now they still want to demand more. And to be honest, I don't know why is there even a conflict. If the EU, the West is so, if you look at the grain deal, most of the grain deal will actually, ships went to Spain and Rotterdam in the EU. Like 3% only went to Africa and the poorer countries. So the bulk of the Ukrainian grain in any case went to the more developed countries like Spain, Netherlands, Germany, France, and whoever, Brussels, whoever was there. So why cannot go the grain, which is traveling by train, not go through Poland and through Hungary and Slovakia and be offloaded in the Netherlands or in Brussels? Why do they have to be offloaded and sold in Poland and thereby damaging the farmers in Poland and creating all this mess that's being there? But the point here is already that they are getting angry and getting fed up. And make no mistake about Poland. Poland is not Samaritan. If you're self-sacrificing yourself for the good of somebody else, I can't get the word now. But the point here is that the weapons they gave to Ukraine had ulterior motives. They wanted new weapons for their old crap. They wanted to change the American weapons systems to NATO standards. And this was a good reason to get rid of their old weapon system. And they got refunded by the pool of money that the rich Germans, French, Italians, whoever, Spain's, the EU had a pool of money that was earmarked for refunding any country in the EU that delivered weapons to Ukraine. So Poland and Lithuania and so on benefited. They actually spent very, very little of their own money that was contributed to Ukraine itself. So these guys are not altruistic. I think that's the word. Yes, altruistic. Eh? Yeah, anyways. So, the cracks are going to get impenetrable. The economic conditions in Germany are rapidly deteriorating. Spain, Italy, rapidly. The economic indicators are not good. PMIs, I think that's what they call it, are not looking good. Purchase Manager Index, yeah, Purchase Manager Index, yeah. So, then we have the election in America. Not that it's going to influence that much, but people, during this time, there's going to be local politics being played inside the administration of the US. And this will make it just more difficult. It will happen, but it will just make it more difficult to ensure. There might be some delay, like this typical shutdown budget of the government, and where the Ukrainian funds were removed from, but it's going to be approved in any case, because at the end of the day, it's a bipartisan view on Ukraine itself. It's just, if you promise them oversight, then those guys will probably agree. Well, they will agree, not probably. But in my case is that, coming back to Putin's plan, I think Putin is playing the long game. We have spoken before, a long time ago again, that he is not in a hurry, that he will wait for the collapse of NATO itself, the economic downturn of Europe itself, the economic problems that exist structurally in the Western sphere. And for me, it has now become obvious in that respect, because they are not moving forward. I would have expected that the Russians would have moved forward, that they would have sort of counter-attacked or something like that, but they're not. They are quite happy to defend their positions, do a little bit of skirmishes, where they can have kill more Ukrainians than lose troops themselves, etc. And the weapon production in Russia also benefits the economy, because creates jobs, money is spent, GDP is increased, and it makes up for other losses in economies. But the funding comes more from higher oil prices and higher energy prices, because the discounts that Russia has given at the beginning is slowly but surely decreasing and becoming on par with the Brent oil price rates and so on. So this is currently my view. It hasn't deviated that much, but I was disappointed that they didn't talk more about that they missed the December peace proposal or security proposal by Russia, which was ignored by the West, which is actually the document on what all future negotiations will be based on. In any case, that's my story for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you want to hear more. Tell your friends. And until next time then, cheers.